So I'm doing the last sign that is left in my series of talking about loving the various sun signs. And I did pick Scorpio to be the last sign. And the reason, and I was thinking this as I went along, I thought, Scorpio is kind of a complex sign, maybe the most complex sign of the zodiac. So trying to decipher it or explain it is kind of a challenge, and so maybe that's one reason I was putting it off. And I did pick a few cards to show the energy of Scorpio, and the ones that are flanking the middle card are both from the Morgan Greer tarot deck that I don't have the box with me, but the other side looks like this. And I actually bought them for the other side, believe it or not. but I do like the colors and the pictures. They're really cool. They're just so vivid. But they both are, well, I should actually say that the Death card on the left is part of the Major Arcana, number 13. And then the Eight of Cups on the right is, because it's a Cups card, it is associated with all the water signs. So that would be also Pisces and Cancer. I don't know if it's connected specifically to one water sign. I'm sure that it is, because even the Minor Arcana have astrological connections to various signs. But the reason that I picked it for Scorpio is because, first of all, the number 8 connects to Scorpio because Scorpio rules the 8th house in astrology. So, the 8th house is the house of death, sex, and other people's money. So I thought that actually what the card stood for, though, really did go along with what Scorpio is all about, which is about leaving behind something which no longer serves the person. And Scorpio is a fixed water sign, and so because of this, it has very strong preferences in life. And water, just the idea of the element of water, we're dealing with subjectivity, because we're dealing with the emotions. Emotions in and of themselves don't have any particular charge. If someone gets angry, they may show their anger in a totally different way than somebody else. So you can't just have this universal definition of what an angry person will do. And how they choose to express that anger is based upon their own, what are called samskaras, which are the psychic scars from past lives, the things that we bring with us from life to life. And some of these are negative tendencies. So a person who has a tendency to act out when they feel negative emotions may, and I'm talking about they have a tendency in past lives, may come into this life with the same tendency. And until they get that under control, it just continues. The lifetime really has nothing much to do with anything. It just continues, because the soul is indestructible. The soul is recording all of this. It's like a hard drive. And so the computer program continues until you change the program and you start programming something else. And so this is why understanding your motivations is so important. For Scorpio, there is a danger because of this subjectivity, because the Scorpio person, and the fixed modality too, because they have the water element combined with it can be very rigid mindset that has a hard time letting go of things, okay? And all of the fixed signs, now that would include Taurus and Aquarius and Leo, have similar tendencies, but they may not be as much related to emotion as Scorpio. Because Scorpio is a water sign, they do tend to have very strong likes and dislikes. And these likes and dislikes are due to conditioning from the past. So prejudice is a big one. Now, people hear the word prejudice and they think of racism and things like that. No, prejudice can, you can have a prejudice against people who are wealthy. You can have a prejudice against people who, you can have a prejudice against anything. Even people who, you can have a prejudice against people who are happy, because if you're miserable, you can feel like there's something wrong with them, or you're jealous of, you're envious of them, and that makes you have a bigoted attitude towards them. So it doesn't have to do with the actual topic at hand. It has to do with having those deeply ingrained emotions. So if you're dealing with somebody who is a Scorpio, understand this. Understand that they are, they can be very, very hard to change. And if I think that it's something that definitely should be altered, that type of tendency, because all signs have shadow elements. It's not that Scorpio is the only one that has them. But I have said in prior videos, I said, you have to accept people where they are. And I do believe that, but by the same token, I do think that we can help one another improve in areas that we need to improve. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that either. So what I would say is that if you know a Scorpio person, or you're dealing, not just know them, but you're actually dealing with them at an intimate level, and you notice that they have a tendency to kind of pigeonhole people and be very rigid in how they view people. Like if they have a first impression, they may, that's what it always is. If they like you right off the bat, then you're in like Flynn. You're in for life. But if they don't like you, you're on the outs. You can challenge that and you can say, really? Well, why is that? Now, why do you think that? I think that you can help people get to a place where it expands their life, and that includes a Scorpio person. Just understand that if they do not alter that viewpoint or that behavior, then you have to decide whether or not you're willing to stay with somebody who does that, if it's a big deal to you. The other thing too, Scorpio tends to be quite suspicious of other people's motives. And my theory is that a lot of this has to do with abandonment issues. As you notice, the Death card is associated with Scorpio on the left there, Major Arcana. By the way, the middle card it says Radha, Hindu goddess, soul flame, okay? And I picked that just because I think of Scorpio as maintaining a very soulful level of devotion towards another person. And that's certainly true. I mean, if they really fall in love, it's very, very deep and it's very long lasting. But accompanying that may be a fear of losing somebody, abandonment issues, and death seems to be a theme, not just with Scorpio, but with all of the water signs. And yet you could even say it's enhanced with Scorpio because the 8th house deals with death as one of its issues. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, the god of war, which of course war is associated with death, obviously, and Pluto. And Pluto is all about healing, transformation, and, the death of the old. And Pluto is one of those planets that, is more of a heavy influence in the sense that it exerts a very serious influence when it transits, different houses of our zodiac, right? And so even like in our natal charts, Pluto can indicate the area where there may be issues surrounding control, surrounding power issues, surrounding transformation, the deepest transformation in our lives. But it's not light and fluffy like Venus or like Mercury. It has a lot more gravitas. So that is true of Scorpio peoples, that they have a lot of gravitas. They're not superficial individuals. And ask somebody who's a Scorpio if they like small talk. They'll probably roll their eyes at you because they don't like frivolous things. Even if they're not talking at all, they don't want to be on the surface of life. The 8th house is all about penetrating deeply into different matters. And so Scorpio people are like that in many different ways. They like to, dig deep. If you are romantically involved with Scorpio, you better understand that, and you better bring that gravitas. If you're a Gemini, you better not be too, shallow. If you're a Libra, same thing. But by the same token, you better not be. Well, and I was going to say, I'm picking on air signs, but what about Taurus? Taurus is the opposite sign of Scorpio. They also must not be too indulgent, because Scorpio people tend to be very good at controlling themselves. They tend to have good self-discipline. And discipline, and that they gravitate towards situations where discipline is the order of the day. And so they're not going to look very well upon people who are living life very in an uninspired way, in a scattered way. They have a precision about them. And it's not the same as a Capricorn individual. It's like a laser. It's very, very focused because they have so much control. Saturn, which is the ruler of Capricorn, is very disciplined, is very orderly. But it's just like an energy of making things manifest. Scorpio's about, those, I can't think of the name. I always want to use that as an analogy. Those houses that are complete teardowns. I can't think of that name. Maybe somebody can fill me in. But, where you're just like a gut rehab. That's what Pluto is, I should say, is a gut rehab job. And, Saturn are the blueprints, okay? But, the actual, ripping out the house of its guts, that's what Pluto's all about. And it really does completely, it's like the phoenix rising from the ashes. And this is actually, I think it is associated with Scorpio as the phoenix. And the other thing, too, is to understand that Scorpio sometimes tries to maintain a sense of power by withholding of themselves. So challenge Scorpio. Don't let them get you to bare your soul, and you are, asking to find out about their background and their mom about it. Call them out on it. Challenge them. I think Scorpios will appreciate that. Scorpios tend to appreciate people who have guts, who demonstrate strength. But it doesn't have to be, of an aggressive variety. It can be a quiet strength. They tend to have disdain when people are professional victims, when they are, milquetoast, spineless types of individuals. So if you want to impress a Scorpio person, be yourself and stand in your truth and don't waver. Be just like the Scorpio person, because they won't waver. At least you know where these people stand, because they're not going to be phony. Okay? They're not going to be other than they are. Sometimes if the rising sign is very disparate, if it's like Gemini or Libra, there may be something a little bit that seems a little bit off, because it's not really revealing their true self. It may be very glossy. Their true self is very intense, It's kind of like a cliche used to describe Scorpio, but cliches exist because they happen to be true. So just remember that when you're dealing with somebody who's a Scorpio, that you're dealing with somebody who is very authentic, albeit they may not be a completely open book. And either you try to, get stuff out of them, or you must be content of, with the mystery of who they are, because they do tend to be mysterious. One thing I did want to bring up is that Scorpio is associated with sex. And I think that the reason for this is because Scorpio takes sex very seriously. It's not like Scorpio to be very, it has nothing to do with promiscuity. It has to do with looking at sex in a more profound way. So sex becomes the way that you touch another person's soul. Whether or not I believe that's true is another story. But that's the kind of thing that a Scorpio person may really revere sex. And so they may be celibate for a long period of time if they have not found somebody that they feel comfortable with at that level of intimacy. So do not get it twisted and think that they're going to be promiscuous because they're a Scorpio. I think that couldn't be further from the truth. And, the other thing, too, is that there's a very alluring quality about Scorpio. There's a piercing, their eyes can be very piercing. This may be true of the rising sign, but I definitely think it's true of the sun sign. You can often spot a Scorpio person. They tend to have, dark features, although I could see, even if they're blonde, that they would seem like a brunette just because of the penetrating eyes, that Plutonian aura, And what else did I want to say about Scorpio? I think Scorpios freak people out because they do have very, very deep-rooted emotions, and sometimes there's a lot going on underneath the surface, a lot. Maybe even stuff they haven't dealt with properly. And in the undeveloped or shadow aspected Scorpio person, this can, be expressed with jealousy. But worse than jealousy is, or possessiveness. Worse than that is false accusations that the other person's cheating, doing tests, or snooping to see if the other person is doing it, being overly suspicious of other people. And that fear itself, I feel, is a self-fulfilling prophecy that will likely lead to the worst case scenario, which is that the person experiences the very betrayal that they were afraid of. So If you're dealing with a Scorpio person who is putting you through the paces, accusing you of cheating, trying to, ask for your, look at your phone or whatever people look at, your computer, your history on your computer and things like that, I think that's a red flag, personally. You may be dealing with somebody with a lot of shadow stuff going on, and this is not, this could be very obsessive. Pluto can indicate obsession. Obsession is nothing more than a power trip going on. Well, I shouldn't say a power trip, but somebody who is desperately trying to gain power over another person, and they do so by trying to control their behavior. And so you have to ask yourself whether or not this is something you want to have in your life. And the scary thing about it is that some people, and it doesn't have to be just a Scorpio I'm talking about here, I'm talking about anyone who is obsessive, is that even if you try to prove, the more you try to prove that you're not cheating, the more they accuse you, because it's pathological. What's going on inside of their head? They can't, it's a very muddled thing. And they really, it's almost like, I think it's a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. This kind of, these obsessive thoughts. And so if you're dealing with somebody like that, realize that they don't feel in control of themselves. They don't feel powerful, and the only way they can feel powerful is by controlling somebody else, and that is a red flag. So if you're dealing with that, if you have a Scorpio child, make sure that you give them enough of yourself. Do not neglect them emotionally. Other signs can handle more, independent and even less emotional interactions. But water signs tend to really suffer when they have parents or caregivers who are, not touchy-feely and not, very intimate with them in terms of really spending a lot of time. When they're kind of a little bit too detached is what I'm talking about. Intimacy between parent and child is that it's not about just going through the motions. It's about really, telling your child that you love them and being very, very, very demonstrative of that affection. And just because I wouldn't be surprised if, Scorpios, all water signs actually have very strong imaginations, and they can have psychic ability too. Very much so. So they can, I feel like they are prone to anxiety because of that tendency to, imagine the worst at times if they're not careful about it, and especially if they're feeling anxious, their imaginations can get the best of them. But also in terms of the psychic stuff is to really support that. If you have a Scorpio child who's saying, he's talking to Uncle Harry, and Uncle Harry's been dead for 10 years, don't tell him that he's possessed with a demon. That would be a nice thing to do. And what else? Scorpio can be a very devoted sign, whether it's a child devoted to the parent, very loyal. Very loyal. And so just, be your best self with a Scorpio person. And they will, if they really have you in their club, you're in for life. So just appreciate it, because they can give you that personalized attention and feeling that I don't think any other sign can really match. And because they are, that's just how they are. They're very, very loyal and perceptive, and that is what a person, they can hone in on who you really are and appreciate you for who you are. Okay, you guys, take care. Bye.